in being on, let me know. The only requirement is to be a member of the Wichita Society. If you have nominations or people that you'd like to have officers, the two people that you can talk to so far are Tom Ewert and Patty Marlette. We're going to get a third person before next month's meeting. For this meeting, Mark Nolan will introduce our speaker, and we will get to our meeting. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. Good to see everybody out tonight. Just a reminder that next month we actually have Bob Gress talking about wood warblers, showing some photographs and stories about wood warblers. And today we actually have 2 in 1. We have Dr. Robert Pinner and Elsi Miller talking about the big year, big in various different ways. Just a little introduction for the two of them. Robert Pinner has been interested in birds since the age of 15. That led to degrees in wildlife management and environmental studies, both with an emphasis in ornithology. He has worked as the Nature Conservancy's Cheyenne Bottoms Preserve Manager since 1996, increasing habitat for migrating shorebirds and nesting grassland birds at the world-renowned wetland. He oversees avian monitoring at other TNC preserves across the state and is author of The Birds of Cheyenne Bottoms. Currently, Robert serves as chair of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network's United States Committee, which allows him to work on shorebird conservation issues on national and international scales, since some of these birds fly all the way down to the tip of South America, maybe those ones. And we also have Elsi Miller. Elsi is a current graduate student at Miami University, Ohio, in the program Project Dragonfly. She's also a AmeriCorps member with Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks at the Kansas Wetlands Education Center, and is the Great Bend Sand Prairie Manager for the Nature Conservancy. And she'll tell us about sand prairies. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, you just, took care of 3 of my slides, just right in that introduction, so thank you.
Sir,
Actually,
could you use a microphone, please?
I think this is working. Okay,
I
how's
hate
that?
to ask, but I just can't hear a thing without it.
How's that?
Closer
More.
to your mouth. That's better.
Better? Okay, how's that?
Good.
Yay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us to come visit with you about our work. This Great Plains Nature Center is just an amazing facility, probably one of my favorite places in Kansas. And it's actually also kind of special to see some of my good friends here again. Well, my name is Robert Pinner, and I am now the Avian Conservation Manager for the Kansas chapter of the Nature Conservancy. And you mentioned that as a preserve manager, the way the Nature Conservancy works on giving you promotions is they just change your job title. And that's all it really was. But it actually describes more of what my work is. I do have a doctorate in ornithology, which is the scientific study of birds, and I would like to claim that shorebirds are my expertise. I have been working at Cheyenne Bottoms for since 1996, but Elsi will be telling you that we also do some grassland conservation work on a regional scale, and I do quite a bit of work with shorebird conservation on an international scale. Again, Elsi is with me tonight. She's my assistant manager, and she will introduce herself a little more, right, Elsi, or not? You're good with what okay. So tonight I want to talk to you about the big year. Now this will not only be about the shorebird big year that we experienced this past spring, but also about some of our conservation projects that we were working on last year and actually will carry on into this year. How do we get this going, Elsi?
The arrows.
It's not doing anything, Elsi. Still it, yeah.
I still think they can't hear you.
Okay. It's not.
You gotta get it right.
Okay. How's that?
Jeez,
that's really good.
That's really good? Okay. Wow. I could hear myself, and that's not good. I also, just as a good example, you know, I am the past face of the Nature Conservancy. Elsi is the future of the Nature Conservancy. I hired her because of her many talents. One of them is because she could run a computer. Obviously, I can't. Okay, so when spring migration started last year, we had plenty of water at Cheyenne Bottoms. You know, and the first Shorebird survey for the season started in mid-March. Elsie, I'm off one thing here. Okay. But as April came around, it turned dry and warm. And it seemed like we had strong winds almost every day. This led to the marsh actually drying up and creating these large expanses of mudflats and shallow water. Now, shorebirds, they prefer short vegetation, generally less than half the height of the bird. And most use by shorebirds occurs in sites with less than 25% vegetative cover. The drying of the marsh was creating thousands of acres of this type of habitat, and at just the right time for spring migration. Now, believe it or not, I realized early that things were setting up to be a very special year. We were getting these large expanses of mudflats and shallow water on the state wildlife area, and along with that, we had created these large expanses of shortgrass and even disc areas on the Nature Conservancy's property. All of these combined resulted in the best and largest amounts of shorebird habitat the area has seen in many years. Now, I have to admit, the ideal shorebird habitat on the wildlife area was not planned. You see, they just couldn't bring in any additional water this spring due to the construction of new water control structures and pumping stations. An additional factor that played a major part in making 2022 a big year for shorebirds was the weather patterns we experienced in April and May. This consisted of winds from the south for a few days, followed by strong winds from the north. This allowed for pretty good migration days for the birds coming all the way from the tip of South America up to the Arctic Circle. But when the wind switched from the north, this forced the birds down to rest and feed and just wait for better flying days. The International Shorebird Survey has been conducted at Cheyenne Bottom since the late 1970s. We start the surveys each year around mid-March. Now, we attempt a survey every 10 days. The 10-day schedule is set up to allow for complete turnover of migratory shorebirds. In other words, all the migrating shorebirds that were counted on day 1 should have moved on 10 days later. However, this survey follows a set route, and the amount of effort is also standardized. So it is designed to provide population trends over a long period of time, but does not give us a total population visiting the site in any given year. In addition to these regular surveys, we had a team in place last year that was able to employ additional surveying methods that would not only complement my on-the-ground scheduled surveys, but would expand the coverage. During the ground surveys, we took photos of shorebird flocks in order to refine the actual counts. We took hundreds of photos at regular intervals along the route, way over 400 photos to be exact. When it was all over, what was I to do with all these photos? Well, guess what? I'm just going to share a few with you. We then downloaded the photos on the computer, blew up the images, and recounted. We also had a super zoom lens that allowed photos of flocks a long distance away. So even though we can get a fairly accurate species count for this group close to the route, as you can see, there's a lot of potential habitat a long ways out there. The super zoom telephoto lens, along with some really high quality spotting scopes, which by the way, I do not own, did help get a better idea of what was way out there. Finally, whenever possible, Fort Hays State University would fly a drone, taking photos, experimenting with different flight patterns, different cameras, and whether or not drones disturb shorebirds. We found out that shorebirds might flush just a short distance if they are close by when we first start that drone up. But they quickly settle down, and they actually show no concern when the drone is in the air. Okay, then we would get photos like this from a drone from fairly high up. I think this is 200 feet or so up. Now these are actually dowitchers, and if you look real close, you can actually see the trail that they leave when they were feeding in the mud. Now this is a little closer up, but it's still tough to identify the species. But let me assure you, with some of the drones that we hope to be purchasing in the near future, we can do a lot better. Now the hope is to develop a new method to conduct surveys, one that would require less resources, saving on both time and fuel, and to be able to cover the majority of the site rather than just a small portion. My current graduate student, Vanita Karki, is working on a program that will identify shorebirds at least by their size from the air. So we may be able to at least tell avocets from dowitchers and godwits from sandpipers. And perhaps someday we'll get another grad student who can refine this so that we can actually get a true species count and number, perhaps just from the comfort of our vehicle. Although I will admit, I'm hesitant on just letting modern technology do all my work. The best part for me of watching shorebirds, counting shorebirds, is watching what they do on a daily basis. Now 2022 was one of the biggest spring shorebird migrations in a long time. We documented well over 500,000 shorebirds, and we haven't seen these numbers in over 30 years. What is significant about that 500,000 shorebirds is that this is the criteria required to be designated as a Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network site of hemispheric importance. 500,000 shorebirds in a year, or 30% of a biogeographical population of a given species, is the criteria for designation. Cheyenne Bottoms gained this designation of a site of hemispheric importance way back in 1988. The 500,000 was a number I figured Cheyenne Bottoms would never see again, as the majority of shorebirds are exhibiting steep population declines. See, most of the historically important shorebird sites just do not record the numbers that they once did. So for a site to be able to document such large numbers was big news in the shorebird conservation world. One of our important conservation partners, Monument, picked up the story and ran it in their newsletter and on their website. I thought that was pretty cool. The future of shorebirds is in question, and this 500,000 number may never be seen again. Even with shorebird populations in decline, being able to host 30% of a species population is still significant. Just in the last 10 years, we have documented 46% of the Baird sandpiper population, 30% of the long-billed dowitcher population, and this year we added 30% of the Hudsonian godwit world population, or nearly the entire Alaskan breeding population went through Cheyenne Bottoms. Now, before I move on, let me mess you guys up just a little bit. Most people familiar with birds know about the Pacific, the Central, the Mississippi, and the Atlantic flyways. But when we're talking about shorebird conservation, there is only the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the mid-continent flyway. One reason is because we are talking about really long distance migrants, going from the very tip of South America all the way up to the Arctic Circle. But the main reason is we call it the mid-continent, because if you're down in South America, for those folks, if you're not along the coastal areas, you're in the mid-continent. So when it comes to developing an international conservation plan covering the entire Western Hemisphere, the mid-continent it is. This past season was a good example of how important the mid-continent flyway is to shorebirds. In fact, we host more shorebirds in the interior of the United States during spring migration than the Pacific and Atlantic flyways combined. It is a different story though in the post-breeding season, mainly because a fairly large number of shorebirds follow a different route on their way back south, mostly following the Atlantic flyway on their trip to their non-breeding grounds in South America. But this also goes to show how important it is to have the right habitat for them. If you set a good dinner table, just like relatives, they'll show up, even if it wasn't totally planned. Now I'm going to change gears just a little bit, and then we're going to talk about wildlife tracking technology. Using drones for surveys is just one example of how we are using modern technology to conduct conservation work. I'd like to talk a little bit about what's called the MODIS Wildlife Tracking System. Cheyenne Bottoms has long been identified as a spot that needed tracking stations, as current shorebird migration data here in the Great Plains is sorely lacking. I have colleagues up in Canada and Alaska that are tagging shorebirds, as well as some colleagues down in Colombia and other South American countries. So it was my hope that we could not only just assist in their research, but also support one of the largest migratory conservation and research initiatives in the world, but also initiate some of our own research projects. At Cheyenne Bottoms, we installed 2 MODIS wildlife tracking stations. The large station, as seen being constructed in the center, is next to the Nature Conservancy's Preserve Maintenance Building. And the second and smaller station is on the Kansas Wetlands Education Center Pavilion, and that's being constructed up in the upper left. Now these 2 stations kind of create an electronic fence across the Cheyenne Bottoms that should pick up any birds that have been fitted with what is known as a nanotag. Now this shows the estimated range for our stations. Again, the large station, located in that northwest corner of the basin, is on the Nature Conservancy property, and the smaller one, and kind of in the southeast corner, is on the Kansas Wetlands Education Center picnic pavilion. As you can see, we not only cover the entire Cheyenne Bottoms basin, but outside the basins for quite a distance. So this allows us to not only track shorebirds, but other avian species as well. These 2 stations were the first installed in Kansas and are part of Elsi and I's Kansas Shorebird Radio Telemetry project, but they are also some of the first stations installed as part of the Great Plains and Cheyenne Desert MODIS Station Collaborative, which is working to fill the void and the lack of data for both shorebirds and grassland birds here in the Great Plains. Now, this was the estimated range prior to December of 2021. Does anybody remember the wind of that year, that 2021, the big windstorm? Well, if you don't, I do, because it's bent over my station. It has bent that over. It actually moved water tanks out on the preserve. It blew in a deer blind, which I still don't know where that came from. But we did learn two things from this. Number one, regular pumping pipe is much stronger than the aluminum tower mast pipe. So we replaced the mast with regular pumping pipe. And we also reduced the number of antenna arrays from 4, as seen here, to 3. So we have a stronger and a lighter station. But we ended up shifting our coverage a little bit. And according to my graduate student, Vanita Karki, we now have a dead zone. Now I'm going to wait to see what her research paper recommends, but we might decide to either shift the orientation of the large station on the Nature Conservancy property, which is, I don't know, 40 foot in the air, so that would be Elsi's job, or we'll switch the small station on K-Wig was only about 15 foot in the air, and that would be my job. I think Elsi just did not realize that was part of her job description. Using the data coming out of our stations, we will be able to determine the arrival and departure dates and the daily activity of any species that has been tagged with a nanotag. And we will be able to refine the estimated shorebird length of stay. You see, length of stay is a critical piece of information for interpreting population counts on stopover sites. And most information about lengths of stay for shorebirds is from the Pacific or Atlantic flyway. There's hardly any here in the Great Plains. So, establishing baseline lengths of stay at important sites such as Cheyenne Bottoms is extremely important. Now, MODIS was designed for tracking animals in flight, such as birds, bats, and even some insects. By using similar technology, we have also been involved in a small way with putting tags on toads and down in the Red Hills and out in western Kansas. And maybe next year, turtles. I'm going to put a question mark after that and you'll see why. But in order to track movements of species on or near the ground, we need to add nodes to the system. In the center is Fort Hays putting up a node. Here's one over here in place. And so nodes out on the landscape serve as both a receiver and a transmitter. And if you have a grid of nodes across a landscape, a node or a couple nodes will pick up that whatever's on the ground and actually transfer it to the next node, all the way down to the main station and our computer. So we need these to study animal movements on the ground. But also we can use a handheld receiver, as Elsi is building over there in the upper right, and then McKinsey is using it in a field here, so we could use that to track animals also. As I mentioned before, one of my graduate students will be publishing a paper on the MODIS wildlife tracking use at Cheyenne Bottoms. This should serve as a stepping stone to more research at Cheyenne Bottoms. And as I said earlier, perhaps turtles will be a new species that we will be studying next year, if we have water by next summer. If the area remains too dry for turtle research, we might actually switch over to putting tags on barn owls, or even maybe cliff swallows. My new graduate student, her name is Sonia Brandt, out of, again, Fort Hays State University. She hasn't written her proposals yet, so I can't answer much on what we're actually going to be doing. But we will be doing something. As I said before, the Nature Conservancy installed the first 2 stations in Kansas at Cheyenne Bottoms in 2018. Since then, as you can see, more have been installed, and there is plans for many more in the near future. MODIS is the world's largest collaborative automated radio telemetry array. MODIS serves as a central hub for detection data from more than 800 receiving stations, as well as the metadata from these stations, such as where the station is located, when it was installed, the height, and the antenna bearings. And it could contain information about tags, such as what species have been tagged, where they've been detected, and the date they first got their tag. Data from across the network is then provided to researchers in a much condensed version shared with the public on their website. So, if you went to the MODIS webpage and looked up Project 350, that would get you to the Kansas Shorebird Radio Telemetry Project. And then you can pull up our species detections over the past year. 10 species doesn't seem like much, does it? But keep in mind, these is just a subset of the total detections. In other words, just a taste of what our stations have detected. These are the ones that the system has filtered out for display. In reality, we have well over 3,000 detections over the past 4 years. Now, I don't know about you, but I get a headache trying to figure this out. That's why they do the filtering and make it a lot easier on the website. Now, not all of these are registered as the MODIS network. In fact, most of them are not, but it does show a great example how many researchers are out there doing radio telemetry work. But even with this large network, there are major voids, as can be seen in the central United States and even westward. This void of stations is slowly starting to fill in, but until then, we're getting tracking data that can be incomplete, such as shown on this tracking map for a Swainson's thrush, which was only detected at 4 stations. This black tern, he did a little bit better. Tagged by one of my colleagues up in Saskatchewan at Jackfish Lake on the 6th of June. And then it was detected at Cheyenne Bottoms on the 17th of July. A total of 8 stations detected this bird, and some stations detected it multiple times. Unfortunately, Cheyenne Bottoms was dry, and so the black tern just flew by as seen in that circle at a little after 5 a.m. that morning. Then there's this purple martin that was tagged in July of 2021, and it was all over the map during the next 2 years, being detected at Cheyenne Bottoms on July 4th of this past year for just 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Where did it go? And without more stations, we just don't know. One thing we're finding out with this new technology, a lot of people think about migration being true north and south. That isn't any true anymore. There's birds going east and west and all over the place. Fort Hays State University and the Nature Conservancy hope to expand our partnership and utilization of the radio tracking technology. We hope to attain funding to start up and maintain a long-term capture, tag, and monitoring program. Working with the Kansas Department of Wildlife Parks, tagging waterfowl, and my hope is working with the Nature Conservancy in the future, tagging shorebirds. Now I'm going to turn this over to my assistant manager, Elsi, and she's going to talk about kind of the things we'll be working on here the coming year.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, so my name is Elsi Miller, and I work for the Nature Conservancy as the Great Bend Sand Prairie Assistant Manager. My office is located in Cheyenne Bottoms, but ultimately I work in the greater landscape, the Great Bend Sand Prairie. So up on the screen, you can see that there's a yellow blob, And this yellow blob is the Great Bend Sand Prairie. It is the largest sand sheet in Kansas. It can be found within 7 counties, and it is about 1,100 miles squared. So a question that a lot of biologists and geologists and people that just live in the area have is, how was the Great Bend Sand Prairie formed? There are a lot of studies backing that the sand prairie was formed by the Arkansas River and its tributaries. On the screen, there's a blue line, and that blue line is where the Arkansas River is at. And if you remember this blob here, it pretty much fits up perfectly into where the Arkansas River is located. One of the studies that have been done on the Great Bend Sand Prairie show that there is a gradual depletion from the northwest corner to the southeast corner of feldspar minerals. And feldspar is a mineral that is found within the Arkansas River. So when you're actually out on the landscape, there are 2 different orientations of sand dunes. So it is thought that in the late Wisconsin, there was a very strong northwest wind that pushed all the sand up into dunes. And then again, in the late Holocene, these dunes were reactivated with a strong southwest wind, creating the second orientation of dunes on the landscape.
She's having trouble hearing you
Oh,
again.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Point the mic toward your mouth.
Right, like that?
Oh, that's much
Sorry.
better, yeah. Yeah, she
Okay.
has trouble, so.
No, you're fine. So, other than the overall importance of the Great Bend Sand Prairie, which we'll get into, there are 2 large wildlife marsh areas, Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge. I'm sure a lot of you guys are very familiar with these places, and they are widely important for our migratory birds. So I want to share a little bit about the different flora and fauna of the Great Bend Sand Prairie, starting with the grasses. So the Great Bend Sand Prairie is located within a mixed grass prairie ecosystem. And so because of that, you will see a lot of your mixed grass species, such as little bluestem, big bluestem, western wheatgrass, buffalo grass. As I mentioned, it's a sand prairie, so there are a lot of plants that are adapted to these well-drained sandy soils. A lot of these grasses tend to have sand in their name, so like sand dropseed is one. As well, I mentioned that we have the 2 large marshes, Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira. So you have a fair amount of wetland plants and salt-tolerant plants. There also are woody species, most of which have been introduced or have become invasive due to poor management. A lot of what you will see is sandhill plum and other small shrub-type species. But you also will see locusts and cottonwood and cedar trees. And then of course wildflowers. You'll have a lot of your common like sunflowers, and then of course you'll have some different ones like curly cup gumweed or prairie ironweed. And then the birds. So there is a lot of amazing habitat in the Great Bend Sand Prairie for all different types of birds. Shorebirds, grassland birds, waterfowl, and shrub-loving birds. So we do have the bobwhite quail in the area. Both prairie chickens were historically found within the region, and also some vireo species such as Bell's vireo. Along with birds, you are most likely going to see some herps. So you'll see a lot of snakes and lizards, but you also might see some frogs or turtles. So Just to name a few, we have the Blanchard's cricket frog, a Prairie lizard, a Graham's crayfish frog, and a 6-lined race runner. So unfortunately, there has been a significant amount of degradation in this ecosystem. As I mentioned with the woody species, there are a lot of encroaching invasives. And like I had mentioned, it's mainly due to a lack of fire in the ecosystem and overall just different types of management. Crops, center point irrigated crops have really taken over in the area, but the crops don't tend to do very well in the area due to the sandy soils. So a lot of landowners actually look to grazing, but unfortunately they tend to overgraze. So on the screen, the picture kind of shows what an overgrazed pasture might look like. Pretty much the grass gets very low, very little. Sometimes there's no grass left, and this really degrades the ecosystem. Climate change, the Sand Prairie isn't special, it's being affected by climate change as well. And fragmentation, so fragmentation with the crops, the ecosystem has been fragmented by crops and urban expansion. So we don't have that continuous sheet of sand like we used to. So what is the Nature Conservancy wanting to do in this landscape? So the first thing is fire. Now, fire was historically within the ecosystem. Pre-settlement, wildfires occurred on average about every 5 years. And the fire would really help to get rid of all the sandhill plum and all the trees, which again, there is a photo up on the screen that kind of shows you can't really see any grass, and that's not what we want in a grassland. So fire would be a really good tool in this landscape. Now, grazing was also historically within the ecosystem, and grazing in moderation is something that would really benefit the ecosystem. Working with landowners to promote sustainable grazing, so making sure the cattle aren't on for too long, or making sure that there's a specific amount of cattle, just making sure that the ecosystem is not overgrazed like it was in that one photo. And then the main management tactic that I believe the Nature Conservancy will use is protection, and that can look like many different things. The first one being easements, working with landowners to put long-term protection on their property, or just working with landowners to have better grazing or implement fire onto their landscape. So intertidal wetlands are probably my favorite part of this ecosystem, and they are exactly what they sound like. They are wetlands that are found in between the sand dunes. So unfortunately, these interdunal wetlands have not been studied very well, but from what we understand, within the Great Bend Sand Prairie, there are 2 different types of interdunal wetlands. And the first type is a wetland that interacts with the water table underground. So the water table is actually a few inches below the surface, and so the water table is what feeds the wetlands. That's where the water comes from. The other type of interdunal wetland is primarily fed by rainwater, and it has what's called a paleoterrace, which is a layer of soil that is high in clay content. And this allows for the water to perch on top of the soil. And these interdunal wetlands are really important for our migratory species. They help to connect the landscapes between our bigger marshes like Quivira and Cheyenne Bottoms. So recently, the Nature Conservancy purchased a property, the Sandhills Ranch, It is a little over 10,000 acres, and it is just northwest of Greensburg in Ford County. And we are trying out a new model called Purchase, Protect, Resell. Now, our neighboring states have tried this model out before, but basically what it is we've purchased the property, and our hope is to own the property for about 3 to 5 years and put in grazing and fire management, as well as long-term protection, and then resell it. And the main goal is to be able to put more protection on our land without having to own it long-term. Something really exciting that we are hoping to do with this plot of land is to manage for lesser prairie chicken habitat. And currently we are in the works of working with some people who are pretty knowledgeable about lesser prairie chickens. So that is what I have on the Great Bend Sand Prairie, but I wanted to share a really exciting project that we are going to be doing this coming spring on Cheyenne Bottoms, virtual fencing. So I'm going to share a little bit about how we're hopeful virtual fencing will work with our management goals. So at Cheyenne Bottoms, we primarily manage for shorebirds and grassland birds. And currently, we are using cattle as a tactic to manage. We also use mowing and disking. But it is our hope that with this virtual fencing, we will be able to have the cows in certain areas so they really eat the grass down really short, so it's that prime habitat for shorebirds, or be able to exclude them from certain areas. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a video that explains virtual fencing a lot better than probably what I could, but I am definitely open to questions afterwards.
Optimising grazing management is a constant battle for the livestock farmer, constantly checking or moving fences to ensure the animals get the nutrition they need without damaging fragile ecosystems or exposing the animals to unnecessary risk. Now technology has a solution: No Fence, a grazing management system that enables the user to manage their grazing without fencing. No Fence uses GPS technology combined with a collar that the animal wears to enable the farmer to define where the animal can graze and to remotely monitor the animal's activity. Matt Turner farms on Salisbury Plain and has been using the No Fence system to manage the young stock from his 190 cow single suckler herd.
Previously, we set stock to this block of ground. Last year, we would have turned out 50 animals and left them to it, but there was the opportunity to try these collars just before the grazing season this year, and yeah, we thought we'd take it up because before we were under pressure to permanently fence this watercourse in order to keep the animals out. For obvious reasons, nitrates getting into the watercourse. The way the system works, we fitted the collars to these animals in a normal couple of weeks before they went out to this block. It didn't take them long to soon respect the noise and the electric poles that they got, but it took them about 5 days to properly respect the virtual fence in order to give us confidence to completely get rid of electric fences. Starting to see benefits already, and the cattle seem very calm about the system. We've been allocating them 0.3 hectares a day, move the front fence up, let them find their new paddock, and then in my leisure I would move the trough and then move the back fence up. So we found since these collars were fitted together 2 months ago, we've had no reliability issues. Battery life seems brilliant. There might be 2 collars out of the 44 that have got 98% battery, but apart from that, they're all on 100% maintenance free, basically. Apart from a bit of loosening if it is on growing cattle. This river would be permanently fenced both sides, so that would mean vegetation would get up. It would mean maintaining the banks so the vegetation didn't die and fall into the river. This would be a good couple of miles of fence to yet again maintain. It's certainly been the catalyst for us going from set stocking to rotational grazing and mob grazing. I'd highly recommend the system to any livestock farmer.
No Fence, bringing technology to grazing management, optimizing nutrition for your animals, helping to manage delicate ecosystems, and keeping your stocks safe. No Fence.
So yeah, that's kind of what I have on the Grape and Sand Prairie and virtual fencing. Yeah, thank you.
Any questions about anything?
Where could you use buffalo instead of cattle?
We do on many of our preserves. We just haven't established them on the Cheyenne bottoms at all. From day one, when we started purchasing property, we purchased it from the various landowners, and so many of them have requested that they maintain grazing on our property. So one thing that, well, first of all, that virtual fencing is going to allow us, as you can imagine, to take out fence. Actually, what we decided may be in eventually 6 miles of cross fences will be taken out. Fences are okay for cattle, but they're not that great for wildlife. And we actually have some fencing that actually was built before I was there that actually goes through our marsh. And you can't have that. Number one, I mean, that fragments the marsh. Number two, it's a collision hazard. We do put collision barrier markers on there, which has helped, but we want to take out as much fencing as we can to open up the grasslands. Because when we started doing that quite a few years ago, even before Elsi came on, taking out cross fences in other areas, we started getting prairie chickens moving in. We didn't have prairie chickens before. Now we actually have 2 prairie chicken leks on our preserve because we took out cross fences. So that's pretty exciting. I mean, because otherwise, Elsi and I have to drive around and check and maintain the fence. So taking it out is a good deal.
Can you tell us something about the efforts to preserve the aquifer in western Kansas? I've heard that there is a lot of controversy going on right now.
I can't answer that much because that's not where I'm at. I'm sorry, I'm an avian biologist.
Okay.
So, want to know anything about Cheyenne bottoms? I can answer that.
I will say, I don't know a lot about this, but I did get an email about a month ago that possibly these intertidal wetlands may be able to recharge the aquifer a little bit. No idea how they interact, but that's just a little cool tidbit about intertidal wetlands.
So I'm just now that she said that, I'm going to add to that. Ducks Unlimited is one of our key conservation partners, and they are trying to protect as many of the playa lakes as possible out there in western Kansas. So once again, here we're looking at putting things back to nature actually can potentially solve some of those problems that you just asked about.
It was interesting to hear about the big year, the big spring of 22, right? And then things dried up. Well, contrast the fall migration in 22 with what you would normally see.
Okay, so as I mentioned in using the International Shorebird Survey, see, we went every 10 days, right? From March into June. We did 0 shorebird surveys in the summer, fall, because there just was no water out there. Having said that, the best habitat, I should take that back, the best habitat was where our water tanks actually overflowed. But the contrast is we had almost 0 shorebird migration. And if this continues on, you know, on a large scale, shorebirds, keep in mind, they're pretty small. And they require the ability to stop on regular stopover sites to stop and rest and feed. If their only first stop from, let's say, the Gulf Coast is the Platte River in Nebraska, and then from Nebraska up to the Arctic Circle, long term, they're going to be in trouble. That's so key why maintaining a chain of stopover sites all the way from South America up to the Arctic Circle is key to their survival.
What do the water prospects for this spring look like?
I was hoping somebody in here would tell me that. Because, so, it looks not good. It really doesn't look good. And I mentioned something about the new grad student wanting to do turtles. It's gonna take a lot of rain for Cheyenne bottoms to even seal up and then hold water. It could be, well, I thought last summer was my worst summer at Cheyenne bottoms, you know. It was really hot and dry, but next summer, it could be tough. It could be tough. So if anybody in here has, I don't know what, rain dance, kind of, direct connection to the Almighty or anything, pray for rain because we need it.
Yeah. Well, there,
Oh, Bob, go ahead, Bob.
You had a slide, and it was where you were talking about the mid-continent flyway versus the other two, and you made the comment that the mid-continent had more combined in the spring than the other two together.
Right.
But on that same slide, it showed the fall numbers were lower than the spring.
Right.
And after a breeding season, how can that be?
You weren't listening, were you?
No.
Because there's a fair number of shorebirds that actually follow a different migratory pattern on their way back south. Elliptical pattern. Coming up straight up through the Great Plains, for example, and following the Atlantic flyway on the way back south.
But even those three together didn't account for chick production, did they? I mean, I would think that after the breeding season, the combination in the fall would be much higher than in the spring.
Should be. That's not my data. Sorry, Bob. So what we're always on, we do not figure in the chick production. It's the adults surviving that are coming back through. That's what they were figuring on there.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's actually the adults' survival that depends how the population does.
They're the ones that are tagged too, aren't they?
Yeah, they're the ones that are tagged, but not all of them. But I mean, so it's the adult population that we're actually trying to monitor the most, because it's them returning to their breeding grounds and their non-breeding grounds is what drives the population. Believe it or not. Did you notice I had a picture that you took in the slide just for you? Yeah, so Bob's gonna be there, I gotta get one of his things.
Your data, you had a slide of various individual lines of data, or a grid of data. Was each line an individual bird or an individual set of observations, or what were you showing?
Yeah, so are you talking about one with the 10 species or the whole 3,000 species? I think Elsie's gonna pull it
Right
up.
back. Right there.
That one,
Yeah, what is that?
tag identification number, right there.
Oh, tag it. So that's
So each one is an individual species.
a species or a bird?
Each individual bird that has a nano tag on it,
Okay.
or Vortec tag or something. So once again, I mean, you have to be registered and to be part of the MODIS system to get onto the website. But these are people that are doing radio telemetry that our stations still pick up, but don't show up on the web page. I mean, it shows up if you're a researcher like myself, and you can go in there and pull them up. But I looked at 3,315, I didn't know what I was looking at.
So does each line basically represent one bird, or, you know?
Yeah.
So what do those numbers mean across there?
We can't read it.
It's basically just identifying the bird?
Yeah, it's identifying the bird, it's identifying the frequency that their radio transmitter was set at, it's identifying the modus tag number if it had one, so it's a bunch of different stuff. And like I said, I don't delve into that, you know, I look at those cool maps and say, oh, look at where the Swainson's thrush went, you know. But this is so other researchers know exactly what they're doing when they're working with these. My actually goal, to be honest, is we put these modus stations up with the hope that we would gain graduate students that would do the research. So I know that much, Elsi knows that much, but it really is, what we're really trying to do is get the newer generation interested in this technology and let them drive our research and things like that. Oh, hey, one back, way back. All right, one of my friends.
Hey, Rob, I don't have a question, but just want to make the comment that as we speak, Wichita Audubon is studying the feasibility of putting a motor tower down at Chaparral Nature Center. So we're working on that right now.
So yeah, that's one of the locations. I mean, I'm aware of a bunch of them. You know, planned mainly in the Flint Hills. I think Fort Hays hopes to do one, but the average range is about 15 miles, and so the more we have in Kansas, the better we're going to know exactly where these birds are moving to. So good for you, Steve.
Rob, the range that you just mentioned, is that like radius or diameter?
So it's 7.5 miles going one way, 7.5 miles going the other way. So, I mean, the ideal situation would have one every 7.5 miles all the way across the state of Kansas, but that's going to look kind of a mess, wouldn't it? But most of these are designed or being put up because people are doing on-the-ground research. Some of our academic colleagues at K-State, Emporia State, Pittsburgh State, all are working on getting more stations out there, mainly because, you know, they want their students to be able to do more grassland bird research, so that's pretty cool. Yes, sir?
When you sell the ranch after so many years of you are using it, are there going to be certain restrictions on what the land can be used for?
Yeah, so ultimately what we're hoping to do is put long-term protection, so conservation easements. And conservation easements typically have restrictions on what you can do with the land. Pretty much the hope is to keep it how it is or in better condition than it is right now. So yeah, that is our end goal, yeah.
Back to the virtual fencing, what generates the signal that the cattle hear?
Yeah, so they're called stations, and these stations, it's kind of like the Modus. They have the rays. They go out about 5 miles, I believe, and they project out a virtual fence. And the collars that are on the cattle communicate with the station, essentially.
And the stations can be moved?
Well, theoretically, I think they could be, but I'm assuming they're going to be pretty heavy and bulky. But where we're going to have our station is where we'll keep it, because it's in the range of where we'll want our cattle.
And they're much smaller and shorter than.
Yeah, yeah, they're pretty small, but they are stable on the ground. So.
I was just thinking like a big cattle rancher that
Yeah, so,
around would need to be able to move.
so for the larger ranches, like you're saying, typically they'll put up more stations. And the stations can talk to each other, so.
But you moved the fence.
Yeah, we're gonna have one station for 3,000 acres, so, yeah. Thank you.
We have refreshments in the classroom, so everybody come join us. One other thing, we have a field trip scheduled to the Tropics building at the zoo on February 18th. And right now, the Tropics building is closed because of avian flu. So be sure and check the website before you come. We may be able to do it, or we may not.
Hey, thanks for coming.